What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvidia, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I want to break down why the market is selling off the way it is, as we're seeing Tesla in the red alongside SPY and all these different tickers, as we got some bad news coming out for the collective markets and also some bad news for individual stocks, including Tesla. But before I break things down about all this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button if you want to see more videos like this. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire Tesla community as a whole. So, anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. Why is Tesla down? Why is the market selling off this morning? That's because of the fact that we're seeing some very, very mixed expectations for the future. So, to start us off, we had some earnings that came out, and most of them were better than expected. We saw Bank of America beat on earnings with a decent growth and a nice surprise by 12.5%. And also Goldman Sachs, they also beat on earnings. They did relatively well. So earnings so far have been decent, but this is not what is causing the market to sell off, at least this data alone from today. What's causing the market to slow down are many different factors. Number one, there's been some talks about how the current conflict involving, Israel and Hamas could get the U.S. involved. There's been a lot of talks about that, and that's leading to some negative outcomes for the markets. Don't forget that these wars tend to be like more bullish for like the longer to medium term. But for the short term, sometimes pieces of news like this could cause some fluctuations. On top of this, many Wall Street analysts are talking about increases in inflation that are likely coming. And they're saying this based off the strength we're seeing in the economy and how it's incentivizing the Fed to be more hawkish again. And finally, the biggest factor I would say for right now is the fact that Wall Street has low expectations for earnings. They're expecting some earnings declines. They're saying that earnings are not going to be the best, and this is leading to a slight sell-off right now because the really big tech earnings start as soon as tomorrow, as we have like Tesla announcing earnings alongside many others. So this is causing the market to become more fearful, more and more apprehensive with these reports coming out, and we will see how this affects us. Now, retail sales were up 0.7% in September. That's hotter than what the estimate was, suggesting that so far spending is still quite high amongst consumers, but credit card debt is continuing to soar as consumers are getting into debt to make these purchases. This alone could, contribute to inflation to some extent, and this is leading to some more bearish outcomes because the Fed may have to become more hawkish because of this. Retail sales were quite strong overall. Looking at the industrial data, it's going to be kind of decent in my opinion once it comes out, but I don't think it's going to affect us as much. We just have a couple of other Fed speakers today. We have Bowman from the Fed giving a speech in Barkin, and we have some housing data coming out 30 minutes after the market opens. That's pretty much it for data. Nothing is like too insane for today. But what's causing more and more fear for the markets would be these individualistic pieces of data causing potential downside. There's the news that Nvidia's RTX 4090 prices have been basically creeping upwards. We're seeing like massive increases, which are once again leading to fear, more and more fear amongst these different investors. For Aapl, Tim Cook made a surprise visit to China because their Chinese sales were very weak. This is once again very important because with the sales decline in China that's going on, this is having a negative effect on the output for Apple. And Tim Cook is now has to make a surprise visit to China, and this is just once again not the best of pieces of news because it just goes to show how much Apple's being affected by all of this and how much China is still continuing to affect the world. Now, when it comes to Tesla, we're seeing some negative headlines coming out. The Q3 earnings are going to reflect lower sales, falling margins, and this and that, according to analysts. And many of them are basically saying the same things. We're getting lots of negative articles about earnings. And then there's this news right here about how Tesla's going to be recalling 55,000 Model X vehicles. However, this is not a typical recall because when you actually look at it, this is just going to be fixed with an over-the-air software update. This is going to help them to basically fix the issue that they had because the vehicle controller is likely failing to detect the low brake fluid, which is not displaying a warning light. But Tesla could once again fix this over the air with a software update. So it's not your typical recall. But the reason why I'm saying it's like a quote unquote recall is because that's how the news is interpreting it. And then that tends to be, negative for Tesla, right? This tends to be negative news for them. They're calling this, a recall for Tesla, even though it technically is not your typical one. So that being said, I mean, it's still bad news nonetheless, and it's still having a negative effect on Tesla. So now I just want to break down the charts and talk about some very important things. All right, so when it comes to Tesla, we had this potential inverse head and shoulders that could have played out had we broken this white trend line right here, but Tesla has failed to really like break through it so far. And as a result, the bearish case, which we had drawn out yesterday, is starting to play out a bit more. We had a bullish case, we had a bearish case, and it looks like we got the rejection. So because this is happening, and because Tesla has failed to break this white trend line so far, the odds do favor more potential downside, especially if the market continues to cool. Now, when it comes to my lines, guys, I just want to be honest. I'm not going to like hide anything. I'm going to be honest and keep everything the same as yesterday. I just want to show you all that, Tesla failed to get this breakout so far. We have this like downwards channel that's still acting as our overall range. So Tesla, if it wants to try to turn bullish, we want to see this thing try to break and hold above this resistance right here, which is going to be very close to this 253.5 area. If Tesla manages to break and hold that, then we could see it try to make its way up to 255 technically. But so far, it's failed to do that, and it's looking weaker. Now, critical support is going to be at 250. You want to see Tesla hold 250. If that fails us, watch 247 as 247.75 to 248, that zone of support. If that fails us, the next level is going to be all the way down here around this 244 area. If we end up losing 247, because that's where we had this historical support, and if 244 fails us, there's technically going to be some support close to like 242-ish to 243, depending on where we are when we test this yellow trend line down here. But just watch those levels. So don't forget to be watching, 247 to 248 as support if we do lose 250, and then we have 244 below that as critical support. So far, Tesla's barely holding above 250. We're currently at 251.5, but if we lose it, that's going to be our signal for downside. So watch 250 as a key level for Tesla. If we lose it, more downside will be coming. So we'll be watching that very carefully. As of right now, Tesla's looking more bearish as we rejected and failed to break this white trend line. So the odds are starting to favor the downside even more. And this trend line right here is looking like it's kind of like encompassing what could end up happening very soon. All right, so that's it for Tesla. Now let's talk about SPY and just a couple of other tickers. Looking at the markets, we went over the bullish and bearish cases, and it was all based off this pennant that was forming. We ended up getting the bearish break instead. So I told you all that if we were, if we want to be bullish, we want to see us break and hold these key levels. We ended up failing to do so after some bearish news. We also have this gap down here on SPY. We have a gap down here if we continue selling off, and it does look like it's very possible. So now what are some levels to watch for? Basically, we have resistance at 434. If we break that, the next level is going to be this imbalance towards this 435 area. And we have 436, 436.5 as resistance above that. If we continue to break down, you're going to be watching support at 433. If that fails, you're going to come all the way down to 432, which is where we have gap support. It's actually close to like 431.7 to 432. So watch that zone as support if we lose 433. And then if we break below 431.7 to 432, then we have this gap down here at 430.7, which will take us down to 430. If we lose that, 428 is a possibility. All right, so once again, guys, watch 433, this 432 zone to 431.7, 430 as support, which is where we have the gap if we do end up breaking below that level. And then below that, we have 428 as support. And for resistance, watch 434 and then 435. Right now, SPY is looking more bearish. It looks like we're on a big downtrend. So we're going to be watching how we could hold 433. If we lose it, we're going to start to see a more downside most likely. So I just wanted to warn you about that. And then as of right now, we're looking more bearish. So be very careful and just know that the market is looking weaker because of all the fear from Wall Street and all these recessionary concerns and talk about inflation going up, and not to mention what's happening with earnings and earnings expectations. For the QQQ is starting to sink because of Nvidia, Apple, and Tesla. Those three are having a big effect on it. I just wanted to call out that we're holding 366 as key support. If we lose this 366 support, it could come all the way down to 364. That's going to be our next important level. And if we lose that, 362.5 is the next important level. Now for resistance, you're going to be watching this 367 area. This is where we have this imbalance here. And if we break above that, you're going to be watching 368.37, which is where we have another imbalance. 368.75 is resistance, and 370 above that. But right now, we're looking like we're continuing to sink. We're barely holding 366 right now on the QQQ. In my opinion, the odds favor us breaking below 366 in the bearish case to continue to play out, as we're going to see more and more bears step in, especially if we lose 366. So watch 366 as key support. It does look like it may break very soon. It is looking more bearish for the triple Q, so we're going to be watching these next supports below here if we do end up getting that break. Now, as far as a couple of other tickers like Nvidia go, Nvidia is also looking more bearish because, let me just pull up the chart real quick. We also have Nvidia sinking very, very aggressively. Now, when it comes to Nvidia, we have this megaphone pattern that's very, very important for it. And Nvidia ended up, failing to hold this megaphone pattern. We actually came up here. Had we broken yesterday from right here, we could have seen Nvidia continue to push up with the inverse head and shoulders. But we also had the bearish case mapped out in case we got some bad news. I was leaning a bit more bullish because of how this structure looked from a technical standpoint. But some really bad news came out with the price increases and the overall collective pieces of news for the markets. This is causing a big rejection on Nvidia. So for Nvidia, we have resistance at 444. If we get above that, you're going to be watching 448 and 451 as resistance levels. And then for support, you're going to be watching 442. If that fails us, there's going to be 440, 437, and then 435 below that. Now, Nvidia looks more bearish right now. It looks like it's dropping pretty hard after these new price increases were announced. So with the bearish news coming up for the markets, and as this is causing the market to sell off, I would say that Nvidia looks more bearish, and 442 is going to be a key level. If we lose that, it's going to come all the way down towards these much lower levels, such as 440. Then we also have, this chop zone very close to this 437 area coming next. So Nvidia is looking more bearish. Got a really, really big rejection off this megaphone pattern. So please watch these levels carefully and just know the odds favor the downside for it. Last but not least, for Aapl, I'm going to try to be kind of quick now. Apple's looking a bit more bearish too because it's continuing to sink down. We're barely holding 177. We had a bullish and bearish case. There was also the case of the head and shoulders forming to get like one more pump before we dumped. Instead, we could still be holding a head and shoulders, except we failed to like really establish a higher right shoulder. So now with the decline in sales that was announced by Aapl, the bearish case looks more probable for it. You're going to be watching 177 as support. If we lose it, watch 176.5. And if we lose that, that's going to be very bearish. Then Apple's going to come all the way down towards the 175 area and can start sinking to much lower levels after that. So watch those supports. For resistance, don't forget to watch 177.5, 178, and then 178.5. So we have like resistance at every 50 cents interval, starting at 177.5. And then if we get above 177.5, I'm sorry, 178.5, then like 180 is a possibility, but it's very unlikely at this point. Apple's looking weaker, so we're going to be watching it to see if 177 holds. If we lose it, it's going to come all the way down to 176.5 potentially. If we lose 177 and these other supports, and right now it's looking more bearish. We're making lower highs and lower lows. We're looking kind of weak right now. So watch this 177 zone. We could end up losing it on Aapl as time goes on, as we're looking a bit weaker. So watch it carefully and just know we are looking a bit more bearish, but don't forget to watch support for confirmation. So watch 177, see if this breaks on Aapl. And with that said, I thank every single one of you so much for listening. So, market's looking a bit weaker, so we're going to be watching these key levels very carefully. Tesla's now at 250, so we'll be watching to see if this could hold. And it's very important to be prepared for anything as we have earnings approaching for Tesla. All right, thank you for listening, guys. Sorry if this video is kind of long. There's a lot to go over. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys very soon. Thank you, and peace out.